Okay, welcome to the second episode of the podcast Stick It to the Man. I'm joined with Kitty Morgan. Kitty, if you just want to start by introducing yourself a little bit, kind of your role in theatre, and kind of maybe a little bit about how you got into it as well, that'd be amazing.
Sure. Hi. Well, thanks very much for having me. Yeah, my name's Kitty Morgan, and I am a writer of book, music, and lyrics in musical theatre. Um, I write all three. I tend to work as a bit of a one-man band in that regard. But I also collaborate with theatre companies and with other writers on various projects. And at those times, it might well be that I'm asked to come aboard as a lyricist and just work on the lyrics for a show. I might be asked to come in and just do some work, either composing or working on something that's already been made to develop it or dramaturg it. And so, yes, I sort of do a little bit of all of those things, and it completely depends what the project is, what the musical is, and what's sort of required. But my preference usually is writing all three because I love being very immersed in it and being a part of all of those elements. And that is also just frankly what comes naturally to me. It's what I've always done. So that's just kind of the way that I've always worked. Um, and then, so in terms of how I got into doing it, I mean, how far back do we want to go here?
Like all the way back, I kind of with other people I've been speaking about, like literally right from the beginning, that how they kind of developed their love for theatre, what maybe inspired them. Was it a particular show? Was it the people around them? Kind of, how they got into it.
Okay. I mean, I just remember theatre in the very broadest sense of the word being part of my life forever. So I remember listening to vinyl records of my parents on a record player of Evita, the Julie Covington version, um, and the Jesus Christ Superstar Passion Play movie version, um, and Blood Brothers, and so on. I was taken to the theatre a few times by my parents when I was growing up. We would see pantos, we would see ballet, which my mum always says that the first time she took me to a ballet, which apparently I was desperate to go to, I fell asleep during the ballet. I think I was a little bit
You quite
young.
try, yeah.
I was obviously in a comfy seat in the dark, and I was probably about 7 or something. Um, and going to see plays. So I'm from Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk, and there is a beautiful Regency Playhouse in Bury St Edmunds called the Theatre Royal, which I was always being taken there to maybe see some anything that was on, really, an Amdram or a show. And so I think it was just a part of my life right from the beginning. Neither of my parents are sort of theatre people as such, but they both love going to the theatre. My mum particularly loves Shakespeare. And this is just my 5-year-old Casper. Casper, say hello to the podcast. You have to say it out loud. Hello. Do you want to grab that cloth and wipe your hands? He's just got some mucky hands from lunch. Well done. That's it. Give them a big rub.
Sign of a good meal.
That's it. Absolutely. It's all over his face and all over his hands and looking pretty ropey right now. Anyway, so I think, yeah, whilst they're not theatrical themselves, they love music, they love theatre and creative arts. And so I was definitely raised around it. And I remember being at primary school, which in Suffolk is years 1 to 4, and making people put on plays and practice them at break time and then perform them to the class at reception time. And I remember that really strongly, just being a part of my life. And I just always had this very strong urge to be making theatre, making up a dance, making up a play. And then I loved performing when I was younger. So I danced, acted and sung, always kind of in the musical theatre type world, ballet, and absolutely loved doing that. All through school, I was never, ever a main part. I was never one of the big roles. I was always like second villager at the back or the kind of comedy ruse.
The best people are always the supporting roles because they like prop up the whole show. They keep it going.
Thank you for your kindness. I wanted to be Rizzo and I wanted to be all of the big roles. But I did used to get cast in comedy roles and character roles. And I think this was really, really important and really shaping for me because I didn't want to play them because they were always unattractive, elderly, drunk, portrayed as unattractive characters in order to be character roles. And then the romantic roles and the lead roles were beautiful, youthful, attractive, and that I think has been quite important in terms of my writing later on.
Yeah.
But yes, I did not remain as an actor. I went to uni and did drama and theatre arts at Birmingham University. It was absolutely brilliant. I absolutely loved it. It was very enriching. It was just fantastic. And the main reason for that is because I was part of the Guild Musical Theatre Group. So that was like a club on the side, but we thought it was the most important thing in the world. It was, you know, we took ourselves incredibly, incredibly seriously. And it must be said that from that cohort, there are a lot of extraordinarily successful theatre practitioners out there who were part of that era. We were just so lucky. It was just incredible. We really did take it seriously. It was our lives. I stayed at Birmingham to do a master's degree in playwriting, which was led by David Edgar and Moira Buffini, Sarah Woods. So again, like some exposure to some amazing, amazing people, really inspirational and really wonderful to have that whole year to write a play. And that was just straight theatre that I was writing. That isn't a musical theatre thing, but I do write straight theatre as well. Not so much at the moment. My schedule is just too packed at the moment to be doing any straight theatre. I do write straight theatre as well, but musicals is my main love. So that's kind of where. So that in terms of sort of like getting into it and education, does that make sense as to how it all began?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Definitely, I think like I can relate to being like really hyperfixated from such a young age and like before always wanting to perform, always wanting to kind of be the center of attention and like being really like always wanting to be on the stage. This is a really, really hard question that I'm gonna ask you. I definitely feel like I would struggle with this, but if you had to try and pick out a couple of projects or like people you've worked with or like proud, what would you say is like been your favorite kind of thing that you've worked on so far in your career? You can give a couple if you want, because I know picking one is really hard.
Is this from a kind of formative? Are we looking in terms of formative, or do you just mean a brilliant experience?
Can be either. You can do both if you want.
Okay.
I feel like it's quite hard to pick one.
Well, in terms of things being formative, for me, that is actually very clear and very straightforward. So when I was in lower sixth, my penultimate year at high school, I had a wonderful teacher called Rosie Ayres, Miss Ayres, and she decided to put on The Crucible. And I was playing the role of Mary Warren in it. And it was the experience of putting on that play. We had a really lovely, wonderful cast, all the people who were doing drama. Two of my very close friends, Nadia Boyden and Claire Presland, were playing Abigail and Elizabeth. And then I was playing Mary. And so we had a lot of rehearsals to do. We had to work very, very hard,
Oh,
lots of
play.
learning. It was the most incredible experience. And Rosie Ayres was the director, and she was just she basically treated the whole thing like we were putting on a show at the Palladium.
Yeah.
You know, it was taken utterly seriously, and it was beautiful. It was beautifully directed in a way that I just hadn't seen anything directed before, with kind of abstract moments. And it was, we really worked on the characters. We went deep into who they were and why they were. And there was a sequence at the beginning of the show where the theme music from American Beauty, I think it's by Jakarta, that goes ding, 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 ding. She was using that music throughout the show, as a kind of, incidental music. And she opened the show with that playing, and Claire, who was playing Abigail Williams, lying on a bed in the middle of the stage. And as the music played, she kind of was thinking, and projected behind her on the wall were images of John Proctor and Abigail together. It was very, very beautiful. And then as she came out of the bed, she got out the bed and folded back the bed sheets to reveal Betty, the character who is in a sort of coma at the beginning of the show, lying in the bed beside her. And it was just so, so beautiful. And we were sitting with Rosie, on Miss Ayres, I should say, on the day that she was creating this and talking us through it and telling us what was going to happen. We were sat on the stage with the lights low. She was describing it. And I said to her, what about if behind the image of them lying in the bed, as she reveals Betty lying in the bed, what if we put up the words on the screen, on the projector, Betty's not witched? And then I thought, and then you could put Betty's witched and then witched, or something like that. And like three kind of images. And she turned to me, the director, and went, oh, we're going to do that. I love it. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
And the feeling that I felt like in my body, knowing that I'd contributed something genuinely dramatically powerful, moving, like magic. It was magic. It was magic. And knowing that I'd added to it, knowing that I'd made something up that was great, it was the best thrill. It was the best feeling I'd ever had in my life. And I can just remember it very clearly. And the whole project was incredible. I still have the book, the play script with all my notes and everything in it. And it was just the most important experience ever. And I loved it.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of helped, I guess, the transition from, because you'd said that you did quite a lot of acting and now you kind of are more on the creative side. Do you reckon that was part of it? Was it quite an easy transition? Was it a conscious thing, or did it just kind of happen as your kind of relationship with drama was evolving?
I think I always, me and my brothers, both of my brothers are also creative. So what, my eldest brother is a composer and my middle brother is a novelist. So it's pretty in the blood. We did, when we were growing up, we just wrote and made comics and books and novels and all sorts of things like that. And we were just constantly doing creative work all the time growing up. That was just what we did. And I learned to play the piano from, I don't know how old I was, maybe I was about 8, I guess, when I started learning the piano. I don't know, can't remember. And so I could always play the piano. And so I started writing songs on the piano once I kind of had learned how to kind of, get by, as it were, enough. I'm not a great pianist, but I certainly learned how to be able to bash out a song. And so writing, I started writing plays about that same era, around when I was sort of about 15. And so I was always doing that. I also used to write a lot of fiction as well, like prose. I don't, again, purely because I don't have time at the moment, I don't do a lot of that anymore, but I would like to do more of it. And so I was always writing and composing, writing songs and, you know, tons of stuff. So I was always doing that. So there was never, when I was younger, there was never a separation for me kind of between performing and writing. It was all just theatre. It was all just what I did. It was as I got older and I started to kind of realize that if I was going to be in musicals, hang on, Casper's come back. Hello, Casper. Casper, in there, there's a whole plate of spares that you can have a spare sausage. Excellent. Love it. Yeah, love it when there's a good hearty appetite going on. That's my 5-year-old who is a very committed carnivore, and I am a vegan.
Oh,
so go figure. So yeah, I just started to realize as I was sort of maybe when I was sort of at sixth form, and you know, I was Patty Simcox in Grease. I was Mary Warren in The Crucible. When I got to uni, I played Annas in Jesus Christ Superstar. I was Dr. Mandrill in City of Angels. I was Gladhand the teacher in West Side Story. I was Nettie in Carousel. You know, I had to sort of come to terms with the fact that I was a character actress, and that what that meant would be a lifetime of being hilarious and grotesque and unattractive. And it just really bothered me. And I didn't want to be it. I wanted to be Maria, and Maria in West Side, Maria in Sound of Music, you know. And I also just don't think I would have been good enough to go into it professionally. My voice is not very robust. I can belt out a song, but it's not particularly robust. I'm just not good enough compared to other people, and I'm certainly not a good enough actress in anything other than a kind of comedy character role. I played in an amateur dramatics production that I did whilst I was at university, still in Birmingham, with like, I think it's called Solihull Operatic Society or something. Solihull Theatre Company. Solihull Theatre Company. I did Sweeney Todd with some friends, which is, of course, just one of the greatest works of musical theatre. And I played Mrs. Lovett. And this was the kind of defining moment, I think, where what better role is there in theatre than Mrs. Lovett? I mean, you know, it's the dream. It's hilarious. It's romantic. It's dark. It's that she's barely ever off the stage. I mean, you know, I think there's about 7 songs where she's not in the entire musical out of like 35 numbers. So it was a dream, and I loved it, and I loved playing it. But there was just something about it that I thought, yeah, I did love it, but I would rather have been Joanna. I just still wanted to be Joanna, and I was never going to be Joanna. So yeah, I think that was a kind of bitter pill to swallow, but I just had to be realistic about who I am and what I look like and who I am on stage. And so that was kind of part of it. And then as I say, I think if I had wanted to go into classical singing, my voice is suddenly very robust, and I can just sing and sing and sing and sing. Anything that's kind of from a C above middle C upwards, I just don't lose my voice. It just stays. I go drinking all night and stay up till 5 a.m, get up the next morning and sing Susanna in The Marriage of Figaro. Fine. But put me in a musical theatre song and I will have absolutely nothing. So I had to really be realistic about that as well and say, Casper's eaten the 2 sausages, guys. Great. Congratulations, Casper. You can have those ones as well. And so I had to just be realistic about, you know, what my life would look like. And I just fell out of love with it. I just didn't want to keep performing anymore. And I think I was quite sort of young, really, when I stopped performing. I think I was about 22, maybe, something like that, 23, maybe at the latest. And yeah, I didn't want to go into classical operatic stuff. That's not quite my cup of tea. And so it fell by the wayside. And fortunately for me, I think really, I'd never stopped writing. I've always been writing alongside it anyway. So yeah, it just won out.
Yeah. So obviously the kind of purpose, I guess, of the podcast that I'm making is to raise the profile of women in the industry and kind of give people who might not necessarily have a voice and, you know, yeah, raise the profile in a very kind of male heavy, especially in positions like at the top, industry. Would you say, have you been impacted by your gender? How has that kind of perhaps played into the types of projects you've pursued, things that you've created? Obviously, you've come from a slightly different angle to, for example, an actor who you have that kind of creative power. Do you think that your gender has impacted that in any way? And if so, how?
I think that for me, writing is a sort of spiritual, magical, integral part of who I am. And there's nothing that I could have done to be anything else or do anything else in life. And I've never been very tactical about what I've written. I'm always just already writing it.
Yeah.
So I never have had to have conversations with people to the effect of, I really wish I could write musicals. I really wish I could write a novel. Oh, I really wish I had something to write about. I'm always more in the middle of a conversation of, oh, I just really need to get back to, I need to get this done so I can get back to the piano because I've got to finish this song, So I think in terms of what I've written over the years, I don't feel in any way negatively impacted by the fact that the industry is male dominated, because I think which I totally agree, it certainly always has been, because I think I've just always gone with what was coming out of me. I think increasingly as I get older, I've just turned 40, and I think as I get older, my work is becoming a much more authentic expression of how I see the world. So where in the past maybe I've made kind of adaptations of classic texts or written original material, I'm finding that is becoming increasingly has a strong feminist magical leaning in a way that I love, but that isn't intentional.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't see it as a mission, but it is a mission. And
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do is I'm writing a show about, a fair, or I'm writing a show about a highwayman, or I'm writing a show about women, mother and baby homes. But I'm not sitting down at the outset and writing a list of objectives, because that's just not how and where my writing comes from. But I'm delighted that is the way that it's going.
Yeah.
And I must say that certainly on the most recent project that I've been working on, the response to that, a heavily female-driven feminist interpretation of a classic, has just been incredibly well received and adored and just like sponged up by people, like in a quite a dramatic way, an unstoppable way, really. And so I couldn't be happier that that's the way that my writing and my soul has begun to move. And I really hope that well, it will carry on forever, because it just is what it is, now I guess there's a much bigger kind of inverted commas scene of new musical theatre writing than there was when I was younger now, because of things like Musical Theatre Network, Mercury Musical Developments, Beam, and various other things, Scratch Nights and The Other Palace, Musical Bites, all those kinds of new musical ventures. So I've been able to meet a lot more women and spend time with other female writers. I'm also part of something called the Advanced Lab with Mercury Musical Developments, where there's men and women in the lab, but I certainly do get to spend time with female creatives, critiquing my work and critiquing theirs constructively. And So I'm much, much more surrounded by women at this stage than I ever have been, which is wonderful. But in terms of, you know, looking at who my heroes are, who do I look up to, whose work is the kind of iconic pinnacle of my work, you know, it's not anything particularly surprising. It's Sondheim, it's Claude Michel Schoenberg, it's Andrew Lloyd Webber, you know, and it's Rodgers and Hammerstein. And so yeah, I didn't ever I I must say, I did never care about that. I didn't ever feel that was detrimental. I didn't care. I just wanted to get on with writing shows. Arthur Miller, that would be another sort of really iconic influence, if you like. Um, and but I don't feel that I was very aware of it or bothered by it, if I'm completely honest. And I know that's almost unhelpful, really, because I love that there should be generations of powerful female writers coming about now, which is amazing. Um, and I think it will. What I think that will do is massively enrich what we've got in front of us as female roles in shows. And so everything that I've been talking about, like with the roles that I would get cast as a sort of out and out character actress, like I just only write character roles. I don't have really romantic leads in my shows anymore. I find them really tedious and boring to write for. I feel like they're very heavily the kind of from a male gaze,
Yeah.
how a woman looks at love, how a woman responds to being in love with a man, or to things like that. I just think the priorities of my characters are probably very different. Their outlook is probably very different. Their behaviour, their responses to men, and so on. And oh, I'm making myself feel like a bit of a trailblazer here, you know, which is hilarious because I've never had any intention to be so, but that would be great, wouldn't it?
It's really like I feel like it's really refreshing to hear actually because you hear so much in the industry and I think obviously it's totally like everyone's unique experience but I think you hear so much especially in like drama schools and things like that of women constantly being pitted against each other and put down and like really
Right.
like fight so hard to gain their place in the industry and actually it's so lovely that you have kind of not bypassed that but it's just like you know on your own little path doing you. I feel like it's really lovely to hear. I think that's really, I think actually that's probably more, not more helpful or more inspiring, but I think it's definitely, I think it's helpful to not necessarily make a big deal of it. And I think actually, obviously, that's the ultimate goal. It's not like, oh yes, we'll give women this opportunity, or I've worked harder because I'm a woman. I think obviously the ultimate goal is to just be like, well, you've worked hard. It doesn't matter who you are,
Yeah.
and it's really nice to hear.
Well, I think that if anything, it, it's genuinely the case that in in writing from a very, very unstoppably authentic explosion of truth, which is what I feel that I've done on The Highwayman, which is the most recent show that I've completed writing or nearly completed writing. Um, if anything, I would say it has been, and it has been all men who have been championing that work and fascinated by that work and loving that work. And actually, not entirely men, because the show is being co-produced by Norwich Theatre, and that's Stephen Croker and Wendy Ellis. And Wendy Ellis has been an absolute champion of the work and absolutely very much on board. So it hasn't been exclusively men, but largely it has been across many, many theatres and different theatre companies. So yeah, if anything, I would say it has been that it has been so welcomed and like wanted and loved by people. I tell you what it does make me think though, is I'll tell you a funny little thing that I don't do it anymore, but I was doing it for about 3 years, is this. I became aware that when I would send an email I would have a certain tone and a certain approach, which was very apologetic and full of the word just. And I can't remember where I heard this. I think it was in a novel. It might have been on something like Woman's Hour or something. I just can't remember where this came from, but I remember somebody saying that if you're using the word just, I just wanted to say, I'm just asking, you're kind of immediately downgrading the thing that you want to ask.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and thinking, God, yeah, I do that. But I thought, I just don't know how I'd write an email without writing, I just want to say this, because I feel that's how I feel about it. And so over about the course of 3 years, I invented my own PA who was called David Partridge. And if I needed an email writing, I would write it as David. And my best friend has been doing this as well. We use the same PA, we share him. And and we, over the course of about 2 years, he became redundant. So we agreed that we would pay him off and send him to live. I think he went to live in somewhere tropical with his family.
Sounds
So
great.
yeah, so he went somewhere. He went somewhere fabulous with a lifelong allowance, and he was retired because I just didn't need it anymore. But it took literally years
Yeah.
to be able to write just the thing, and I'd say it's still an ongoing process,
Yeah.
just to be able to be honest and upfront, polite, respectful, but clear and upfront, and to give my actual true opinion. And I think that's a work in progress, but the invention of David Partridge, of just pretending that I was a man in a man's world, was extremely useful and really powerful, and sometimes the only thing that could get me to hit send.
Was yeah, that's so interesting that you've brought that up, because literally the last person that I interviewed, we had this exact conversation, and it was like the apologetic tone of how we speak. It's so interesting, and actually, like,
No way.
I'm really glad you brought that. Yeah, because we were like, actually, and I'm so bad at doing this. I'm awful at doing this. I was on like an online, it was like an English, like an online English course that I was doing, just like getting my uni apps and stuff ready. And it was really interesting to hear how the boys talked versus how the girls talked. And we were looking at a passage of text, and it was Milton, so it's quite challenging. And the boys were like, yeah, this is what it is. This is what it means. It means this, this, and this. This is my opinion. And all the girls were like, oh, I'm not sure if this is right. It might be this. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it might be this. And it's so interesting how, like, actually, no, you just like stick to your guns. Like, you've got your opinion.
Yeah.
I think that's so.
Yeah, I've got a line in Highwaymen where when the crowd, the gang, are discussing the new love of the life of the Highwaymen, they, without having ever met her, encountered her in any way, they say, I heard he met this bossy, pushy slut out under Suffolk skies. And they refer to her repeatedly as a bossy, pushy slut. And it's not really delved into in the show. It's just how people describe her. And she is, it would be fair to say that she is an assertive, powerful, lustful, romantically inclined woman.
Yeah.
Sure. But I think if you've grown up knowing and being criticized for the fact that you might be bossy, that's a female word, that you
Yeah.
might be pushy, that's a female word, that you might be a slut, that's a pushy word, a female word, that you might be difficult, that's only used for women. These things, if you've grown up and your whole culture, your entire community wants you to be meek, positive word for women, modest, positive word. I hate the word modest. Absolutely despise the word modest.
Annoying.
Yeah, like, oh, I can't bear it. if you've grown up with those kind of if your positives about you are that you can be pretty, petite, modest, slim, meek, sweet, if they're your positives and your negatives are being difficult, bossy, pushy, you automatically, it's very hard to break out of that prison. And
Yeah.
I think because of like social media and huge communication available between the women of the world, I hope it will change, and I hope that the culture is changing around that. And as somebody said to me yesterday, in the Christian Bible, the greatest and first sin of the world is that a woman ate something.
Yeah.
Just ate something. The greatest and the worst sin. So yeah, it's a whole environment, and it's hard to unpick because it's everything you ever believed was true,
Yeah.
and everything you ever believed would make you liked and make you acceptable and a part of your community.
Yeah.
It's a lot to work around. Yeah.
Yeah. I think definitely trying to kind of get out of that headspace of yeah, as you said, those words, the kind of language shift that is used for men and for women, I think is really hard. Um, and like my friend always says this story. She wheels it out all the time. She's still got a vendetta against it, but when she was younger, there was a boy in her class who they were both equally intelligent and capable, and they were both. She is very like one of the most like stubborn, knows what she wants, assertive. She's like amazing, but a very, as you said, would be negative connotations of a woman. And she was always in like reports and parents' evenings and everything like that. She was bossy, she was controlling, she was too loud. And the boy in her class was confident, had good leadership skills. And it's just so,
Mm-hmm.
even from like 4 or 5, that is how you are presented as a woman. I think it's so, and like I hope that will change, and I hope that will shift. But it's really interesting. um
We're changing it, babes. We're doing the
yes,
work. This is the
yes.
work. This is it.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on. To kind of round up, you briefly touched on it earlier, but if you want to just tell everyone what you kind of got going on, what projects you've got coming up, and just kind of this is your moment to like advertise yourself, let everyone know what you've got going on.
Lovely. Thank you for the platform. I appreciate it. So, show I've talked about a couple of times. The Highwomen goes into production this summer. Rehearsals begin in July, actually, so it's not long now. And it will be touring to opening in the Norwich Theatre in Norwich Playhouse, coming to the Roman Theatre in St Albans, the Theatre Royal Bury St Edmunds, my hometown, and the new Wolsey in Ipswich. So that's all happening over the late summer and early autumn this year. I have a new musical that I'm writing called Stagshaw Fair, which is going into development with the National Youth Music Theatre this summer. That's really exciting. That's a very, very early doors, very new project. And I am working on a new musical called Hush Now, Hidden Women, with a company called Feral Productions. And that is the story of mother and baby homes across the UK where women had their babies taken away because it was socially unacceptable to have a child out of wedlock. I think that is just about it. I've got yeah, they're the main things that I've got going on at the moment. So absolutely lovely.
Sounds so interesting. Well, hopefully they're all very successful. I'm sure they will be. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been really interesting to have a chat with you.